You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
Leaving behind an unfinished legal battle against the NIA, against the dreadful UAPA laws, and against a system that has been trying to crush dissent mercilessly, Father Stan Swamy passed away at Mumbai's Holy Family Hospital, still waiting for his bail. This 84-year-old Jesuit priest who had been working for tribal rights in Jharkhand was one of those who were arrested on terror charges in the Bhima Koregaon case. And given his old age and comorbidities that included a heart condition, Parkinson's disease, hearing loss in both ears, and physical injuries from falls that he had taken during his imprisonment, Swamy had applied for bail. And even though the NIA didn't seek his custody for interrogation, they kept him lodged in a jail for close to 9 months and opposed his bail twice, even as his health weakened. In fact, last year, when Swamy had applied for bail on humanitarian grounds, citing his susceptibility to coronavirus, the NIA had gone on to say that Swamy was taking quote-unquote undue benefit of the pandemic to seek bail. In May this year, when the Bombay High Court directed for him to be shifted to a private hospital in Mumbai from Taloja prison, he had pleaded for interim bail so he could be with his quote-unquote own people at Ranchi. And as he died of a cardiac arrest as a pre-trial prisoner on 5th July, right before the Bombay High Court was set to hear his bail application, the focus is once again back on the draconian UAPA laws that have been used by the Indian state to lodge people into jail for years without a trial, even when there's only flimsy evidence against them. The questions to ask around Swamy's death is, who's really responsible for this death? Is it his medical conditions, or is it the apathy of the judiciary and the criminal justice system that, instead of coming through for his fundamental rights, continued to treat him like a UAP accused until his last breath? In this episode, you'll hear from human rights activist John Dayal, senior advocate of the Supreme Court Colin Gonsalves, and Vrinda Grover, who's a lawyer, researcher, and human rights activist. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline-making news for you. And I'm your host, Shorbari. It's not just rights activists and opposition leaders in India who are mourning Father Stan Swamy's death. Messages of condolence have been pouring in for Swamy from across the world, from UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights Defenders and European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, who have all been opposing the imprisonment of the 16 activists, lawyers and poets, including Swamy, in the Bhima Koregaon case. This case from 2018 has become a big instance of the kind of crackdown on dissent and rights activists that is going on under the Modi regime. Although Swamy has been accused of conspiring and attempting to instigate caste violence in Bhima Koregaon in the year 2018 by the NIA, looking at his decades worth of work in Jharkhand, what comes out clear is the kind of empathy he had towards the marginalized. Swamy was born in Trichy in Tamil Nadu, and he studied theology alongside a master's in sociology at the University of Manila around the 1970s. Inspired by the Jesuit priests, Swamy became a member of the Jesuit order. And it is said that Archbishop Holder Camara's work for the poorer communities in Brazil influenced Swamy to dedicating his life for the marginalized and the poor. In Jharkhand, he worked to recognize Adivasi rights over land, forests and natural resources. He also conducted a study of under-trials in Jharkhand who were arrested on charges of having Maoist links. Of course, in India, Swamy is known for his passionate work for the rights of Adivasi communities. But when asked what is it really that defines Stan Swamy, his friend Joe Xavier recalled that one day, when Swamy asked for a pair of pant and shirt in jail, he knew that it was not for him. Mr. Xavier said that Swamy would never ask for a material need. And when he probed, Swamy confessed it was for a fellow inmate who was poor and didn't have money to afford clothes. To quote Joe Xavier, that defines Stan Swamy. Human rights activist John Dayal says that his friend Father Stan Swamy had gone outside the boundaries of the church to help and to be with the people.
So you have to understand not just the man, but his growth from when he first joined the Jesuit. He's 84 years old. So he had been a Jesuit more than 60 years, really. More than 60 years, he was a Jesuit. And that is in the nature of Jesuits. That's in their training. They work with the people. And most of them work outside the basic limits of the church. Some of them work as fathers and bishops, but most of them work with the people. And to quote Stan himself, He had gone out of the limits, of the boundaries, of the walls and the roof of the church to be with the people. He was a global voice for the tribals. And today, whether it's politics, whether it's sociology, whether it's economics, the issue of tribals is of paramount interest. They are in the forest. Under the forest, in the forest is a resource. The forest itself is a resource. And that resource is sought to be taken away, to be sold out, to be given to crony capitals. Laws of the land, the ecology of the land, the laws framed to protect the ecology, the laws framed to ensure that forests remain forests, that the people in the forest earn their livelihood in the forest, have all been thrown to the winds, have not been implemented. You want to give a plot of land of a few thousand square miles to some mill, you give it. To some mile, you give it. You don't care what happens to the trees, what happens to the environment, what happens to the wild. You want to dig a mine, you can dig it, you can ruin the earth. The people can starve. The people don't want to starve. The people don't want to be the property stolen from them, their livelihood, the gods stolen from them. And people like Stan, and he was not alone. He was a towering personality, but he was not alone. People like him were giving a voice to them, and that is what made him an enemy of the state. That's what ensured that whatever excuse they found, if there were no Koregaon's case, they would have concocted some other case because they wanted to silence these voices. But they have not silenced Stan Swamy. They have not silenced his tongue.
It has been reported that just 2 days before the NIA took him into custody over alleged Maoist links and charged him under UAPA, Swamy had voiced criticism over the draconian UAPA laws that have been misused to arrest tribals, quote-unquote, indiscriminately. And ironically, Swamy himself became a victim of the controversial anti-terror legislation that has often made victims of innocent Indians. Now, the NIA had been conducting raids at Father Stan Swamy's residence in Jharkhand since 2018 when the Bhima Koregaon incident had happened. And when it summoned him to its Mumbai office in October 2020, it had indicated that he was going to be interrogated further in connection to the case. But he was arrested on October 8th, and since then, even though the NIA continued to oppose his bail and continued to oppose admitting him to a private hospital as his health deteriorated, they did not seek his custody for interrogation. So was his arrest necessary? Lawyer, researcher and human rights activist Vrinda Grover points out the many problematic aspects of the NIA investigation.
So in August 2018, a round of raids and questioning happened right up till October 2020. At the end of which, whatever they needed to ask him, whatever they needed to discover had all been done. And then he was asked to come to Bombay, where the NIA proceedings are taking place in the Bhima Koregaon matter. And it is a matter of record and undisputed that Stan Swamy was not part of the Elgar Parishad event at all. He, in fact, said at that time from Ranchi that I suffer from Parkinson's disease. I'm 84 years old. It will be difficult for me to travel to Bombay at this juncture. And we remember that in October 2020, COVID was still very pervasive and rampant. However, he was compelled to come there. And after he was brought there, he was produced in court, arrested, produced in court, and thereafter sent to judicial custody, from which now his corpse has emerged. The NIA did not seek his interrogation for a single day. Whatever devices, whatever they wanted from him had been seized way back in August of 2018. The charge sheets, as we know, the charge sheet and supplementary charge sheets have been filed and continue to be filed. In the Bhima Koregaon matter, people were first arrested in June 2018. There were 16 very important, prominent human rights defenders imprisoned as of today. The trial has yet to begin. The charges have not been framed. Yes, the law invoked by the NIA is the UAPA, of which they say there are some letters. The authenticity of the letters has been very seriously challenged. by reports that have emerged out of digital forensic agencies which have looked into and examined, and that is a process that is still before the Bombay High Court.
She also points out the fact that with the onset of the pandemic in 2020, the Supreme Court had taken up a suo motu matter and asked states and union territories to decongest jails in view of the pandemic. It had asked states to consider releasing prisoners or under trials on parole or interim bail, and yet people like Stan Swamy, who had frail health conditions, did not make the cut.
Stan Swamy falls ill and gets COVID. Here I want us to just remember that the Supreme Court, when COVID struck in 2020, had initiated a suo motu matter on decongestion of prisons. And then high courts across the country formed high-powered committees headed by senior judges of that high court to look into and set down the criteria of decongesting prisons. One of the issues that I want to raise here, and which I actually raised with the Delhi High Court in this time round also, that when you are decongesting prisons during COVID time, the criteria to be adopted have to be health-centric and not offense-centric. Unfortunately, most high courts, a majority of them took the view that, well, anybody under UAPA or PMLA or any such offense is not even going to be in the zone of consideration, which actually makes little sense. I think it's a flawed reasoning, because if you are decongesting to prevent the health hazard, then you have to see who is vulnerable to COVID and how many need to be removed from the prison cells so that you can follow some semblance of physical distancing. Those criteria, unfortunately, were not adopted. We know that Indian prisons are places where even if you are healthy, your health is going to deteriorate. Here we have an 84-year-old with Parkinson disease who says to the court that my health is deteriorating very rapidly and the medical attention given to me is not sufficient. And in fact says in as many words, this is really like the chronicle of a death foretold. And he says, I'm going to die. He suffers COVID. He has now died of post-COVID complications, which include lung infection, cardiac arrest. A man who had suffered COVID was not granted interim bail to recover. NIA opposed it. The court eventually only allowed him to be shifted to a hospital, did not grant interim bail.
One of the big reasons that Stan Swamy, despite not being a convict, lost his life fighting for bail was because he was a UAP accused. And irrespective of his health conditions, he was treated like a UAP accused till the end. As we know, this dreaded law allows for raids and arrests to be made without warrants on the basis of a mere suspicion against somebody for supporting terrorist acts or unlawful activities. And because of the vague definition of what unlawful activities really entail, this law has made it possible to be used against anybody, be it academics or activists, for mere questioning against the state. It's not just the Modi government, but time and again it's been used as a weapon to thwart dissenters. But why it became a weapon of choice is because for people arrested under UAPA charges, be it on the basis of the flimsiest evidence, if they fail to secure bail, it means that they have to spend the entire time in jail, even as the judicial proceedings get delayed. That could be months or years. And that's because the UAPA law states that a court cannot release someone on bail if they're accused of terror-related offences. Like Swamy, another Bhima Koregaon accused Varavara Rao, whose ailing health had made it to the headlines, had sought bail on health and humanitarian grounds. And just like Swamy's case, his bail was denied as well repeatedly, even though he was a pre-trial prisoner, not a convict. So we come back to this question: what or who is really responsible for Swamy's death? Mr. John Dayal says that Swamy's death was foretold by the way he was treated by the Indian state.
How does one feel when an elder in the family dies? We are saddened, we are shocked, we are in a state of internal turmoil. But we have been anticipating it. It's a death foretold. We know that the government wanted him to die in jail. Technically, he died in a hospital, but he was still not on bail. He was still in judicial custody. And people like me start unraveling his death from that point. we will also celebrate Father Stan Swamy and his life and what he meant to us, what he meant to the country, to the Dalit people of the world. We'll do that too. But in a moment of grief, how can we forget that he could have been given bail? He could have been given medical attention 6 months ago, 9 months ago, soon after he was arrested. But the cold-blooded, deliberate manner in which he was denied bail, and in the same manner in which Varvara Rao was denied bail, made it very clear to us and to the whole nation that a very vengeful government was hell-bent on trying to teach him and through him and them in his colleagues who were arrested in the same Koregaon case a lesson that they will brook no dissent, they will brook no voice for the people, that they will not brook any opposition that comes in the way of their implementing the political and the economic agendas and the social agendas for that matter. The larger political establishment included, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the Supreme Court have taken so vote action scores of times in the last 8 months, and for Varvara even longer, and for Babu even longer.
Ms. Grover says that Stan Swamy's death is not so much because of illegal resistance as it is because of the vindictive system.
And this is not a legal resistance. It's almost like the state is being vindictive and you're trying to punish an under trial. The court is reluctant to allow a man to recover who's in very frail health. So what we have actually done is to give an under trial a death sentence, and something that from the circumstances and from his own words, there was no confusion on this count. So therefore, it's not a tragedy that has befallen. The death of Stan Swamy is due to criminal neglect by the criminal legal system. And by invoking UAPA, and we have seen this repeatedly, these laws are invoked in order to overwhelm the legal system from awarding bail. And while the conviction rate is an dismal 2.2%, no evidence is available. It's nobody's case that he has committed any act of violence ever. And yet we have today before us a man who was at worst an under trial, but to whom the criminal legal system gave a death sentence.
Now, much has been said and continues to be said about the controversial UAPA laws, but what is also invoking harsh condemnation is the apathy and inaction of the justice system that is supposed to be on the side of citizens' rights. Speaking of his condition in jail, Swamy had told the Bombay High Court, and I'm quoting his statement, quote, 8 months ago, I would eat by myself, do some writing, walk. I could take a bath by myself. But all these things are disappearing one after another. So Taloja jail has brought me to a situation where I can neither write nor go for a walk by myself. Someone has to feed me. In other words, I'm requesting you to consider why and how this deterioration of myself happened. My deterioration is more powerful than the small tablets that they give. End quote. And despite his conditions, Swamy couldn't secure a bail until his death before the Bombay High Court. Colin Gonsalves, senior advocate of the Supreme Court, says that the small shreds of hope from the judiciary has almost been extinguished for him with Swamy's death.
I knew Stan Swamy for many decades. Even as a young activist lawyer, I used to go to Jharkhand and meet with him and his colleagues. He was very soft-spoken then, he was very soft-spoken now. As soft-spoken as he was when he asked for bail before the court, and his body was so feeble, he was so frail, and he told the judge, either send me to prison or you send me home on bail. I don't want to go to any hospital. Frail he was, and he spoke so quietly, softly to the judge. This was Stan Swamy. A fighter for tribal rights, a soft-spoken man, a gentle man, a frugal man, living austerely, not caring about worldly goods, worldly possessions and wealth and things like that. The finest human rights activists you can possibly find. And what did the judiciary do to him? They sent him to his death. The legal processes, obstructing his applications at every stage, preventing him from getting to hospital on time, arguing against his bail applications again and again and again. I have no doubt that the legal system and all those inside it have a hand to play in the death of this man. And I hope that one day all of us who are in the legal profession realize that the role we play in sending people to their death through the legal systems, it's such a crime, it's such a terrible, terrible crime. And we play such a terrible role in stopping people from being free, in preventing them from going home, even when they're in their 80s, when they have so many comorbidities and they plead for bail. What kind of cruelty is this? How cruel has our system become? How terrible we've become. I feel very bitter. I feel very bitter about what happened to Stan. And I cannot forgive all those who had an instrument in preventing him from getting bail and in sending him to his death. I cannot tell you how angry I feel. Even today I had a little hope and faith in the judiciary. Stan Swamy's death is almost the extinguishing of that hope. I have very little hope now left.
Although Stan Swamy is no more, will the system finally wake up and prevent further injustice? If you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to the Big Story playlist for episodic updates. We're live on Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website and check out the podcast section. For any feedback, shoot an email to podcasts@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.